Commander James Walker stood alone in his workshop on the far side of the moon, away from prying eyes. The lights were dim, and his fingers moved across the holographic display, adjusting the designs of a ship unlike any other. His eyes, tired from lack of sleep, never left the blueprints of what he called Phantom. The military had laughed at him 3 years ago. They called his ideas impossible. Adaptive hull materials that learned from damage. An AI system that evolved during combat. An engine that grew stronger the harder it was pushed. Fairy tales, they had said before cutting his funding. But James didn't stop. He couldn't. The idea lived inside him like a second heartbeat. His workshop was small but packed with equipment he had gathered over the years. Some of it was borrowed, some bought with his savings, and some pieces were technically stolen, though he preferred the word liberated. The room smelled of coffee and machine oil. "Commander," the voice from his computer made him look up. "Your coffee is getting cold." Again. "Thanks, AI," he said to the basic AI assistant he had programmed. She wasn't much, but she kept him company in this lonely place. He reached for the cup without looking, his eyes still fixed on the problem of power distribution in Section 5 of the Phantom. A small cleaning robot bumped against his foot, pushing the fallen cup back in place. James had gotten used to dropping things. Outside the small window of his workshop, Earth hung in the black sky like a blue marble. Sometimes he missed it. Sometimes he didn't. Earth had people who doubted him. Here, he only had his work. James moved to another display and checked the messages. Nothing new. The military had stopped asking for updates months ago. His old friend Admiral Reed still sent him birthday wishes, but even she had given up on his impossible ship. Run simulation 347 again. Let's see if the new hull configuration handles plasma impacts better. Running simulation, responded. On the large screen, a model of the Phantom took hit after hit from simulated weapons. The hull glowed where it was struck, and tiny nanomachines rearranged the molecular structure to absorb and learn from each attack. With each hit, the ship became stronger. James smiled. It was working better now. Not perfect, but better. His moment of satisfaction was interrupted by an urgent beep from his communication system. The screen switched to show a military alert. James felt his heart stop as he read the message. Colony Outpost Delta destroyed. No survivors. Colony Outposts Echo and Foxtrot also gone dark. Unknown hostile force detected moving toward inner colonies. All personnel on high alert. James reached for his communication panel with shaking hands. He sent a direct message to Admiral Reed. "Laura, what's happening out there?" The reply came faster than he expected. "They call themselves the Carvers. 3 warships appeared without warning. Our best defenses didn't even slow them down. Nothing like we've ever seen before." James looked back at his blueprints, at the half-built prototype in the center of his workshop, at the years of work that everyone had called a waste of time. His heart raced. "How long until they reach Mars colony?" he asked. 2 weeks at their current speed," Laura replied. "Maybe less. Our ships are engaging them. But it's not going well, James." James took a deep breath and made a decision. "I need to show you something. The Phantom. It's not just an idea anymore. It's real. The Phantom. Your ship that evolves during combat. James, we don't have time for." "It's our only chance," James interrupted. "Give me 3 months, a crew, and whatever parts I need. I can finish it." There was a long pause before Laura answered. "I'll be there tomorrow. Show me what you've got." James looked at the unfinished ship, the product of his obsession and brilliant mind. "Hear that?" he whispered to the Phantom. "It's time to stop being a myth. It's time to become real." Admiral Laura Reed stepped out of the shuttle and onto the dusty lunar surface. She was tall, with short gray hair and a face that rarely smiled these days. The weight of humanity's defense rested on her shoulders, and it was getting heavier by the hour. James was waiting for her at the airlock, looking thinner than she remembered. His eyes had dark circles under them, but they burned with an energy she hadn't seen in years. "It's bad, isn't it?" he asked before she could speak. Laura nodded. "Worse than the reports say. The Carvers have technology we can't match. Their ships can take hits that would destroy 3 of ours. And they're moving faster now." She followed James into his workshop. The lights came on automatically, revealing the large shape in the center of the room. Laura stopped and stared. The Phantom wasn't beautiful. It looked strange, with an uneven hull that seemed to ripple slightly as if it was breathing. Parts of it were unfinished, with wires and components exposed. "This is it?" Laura asked, trying to keep the doubt from her voice. James walked around the ship, touching it gently. "This is just the body. The real magic is in the systems." He led her to a display and brought up diagrams that Laura struggled to understand. The hull is made of a new alloy mixed with billions of nanomachines. When the ship takes damage, they analyze the attack and restructure to resist it better next time. He pointed to another section. "The AI core is designed to evolve during combat, learning enemy tactics faster than any human could." Laura sighed. "James, the military leadership sent me to evaluate if this is worth our limited resources. They think I'm wasting my time." "And what do you think?" James asked. She looked at him for a long moment. "I think we're out of options. The Carvers destroyed 6 more outposts yesterday." James's eyes widened. 6? That fast?" Laura nodded. "We need a miracle, James. Can the Phantom be that miracle?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "But I need help. Good people who can think differently." Laura pulled out a tablet and showed him profiles of 3 people. "I found them for you. Lieutenant Tom Miller, AI specialist with 4 reprimands for unauthorized programming. Dr. Ellen Martinez, weapons theorist whose ideas were too radical for the military science division. And Chief Engineer Mark Davis, who claims he can talk to machines." James smiled for the first time. "Perfect. When can they get here?" "They're on the shuttle, along with the parts you requested and a full authorization for whatever else you need." James looked surprised. "That was fast." "We don't have time to be slow," Laura replied. "The Carvers will reach Mars in 10 days, not 2 weeks. Earth has maybe a month after that." 3 months, James said quietly. "I asked for 3 months." Laura looked him straight in the eyes. "You have 6 weeks. That's all the time humanity has left if we can't stop them." The airlock opened, and 3 people entered the workshop. They looked around curiously, their eyes finding the Phantom. "Is that it?" asked a young man with messy hair and a wrinkled uniform. "Lieutenant Miller." He walked closer to the ship without waiting for permission. "The adaptive AI ship. I've read your papers, Commander. They didn't make sense until I stopped thinking like a human." Dr. Martinez, a small woman with intense eyes, was already examining the weapons systems displays. "The energy distribution is all wrong," she muttered. "But I see what you're trying to do." Mark Davis, a large man with hands that looked too big for delicate machinery, placed his palm on the hull of the Phantom. "She wants to fly," he said simply. "She's been waiting." James looked at Laura, a new determination in his face. 6 weeks might be enough. "But we start now." Laura nodded and headed back toward the airlock. "I'll handle the military. You make that ship real, James." As the door closed behind her, James turned to his new team. "The Phantom isn't just a ship. It's a new way of thinking about war. And if we succeed, it will change everything." Tom grinned. "When do we start?" "We already have," James replied, and turned on all the workshop lights. 5 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The lunar workshop had grown 3 times larger as more equipment arrived. The Phantom now stood in a proper dock, looking more like a real warship with each passing day. James hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since they began. He watched as Mark crawled out from under the ship, his face black with some kind of oil. "The power core is connected," Mark said, wiping his hands on a rag. "But it's not stable. If we push it too hard, it might blow up." "We don't have time to make it stable," James replied. "The Carvers just took Mars. Earth is sending everything they have to make a stand at the Jupiter defense line." Tom looked up from his computer station. "The AI core isn't ready either. I've loaded all the combat data we have on the Carvers, but until it experiences real battle, it won't know how to adapt properly." Ellen walked in with fresh coffee for everyone. She had spent the night testing weapon simulations. "The guns work, but the targeting system is only at 70% accuracy. It needs to learn." James drank his coffee in one gulp. Everything needs to learn. That's the whole point of the Phantom. It needs real combat experience to reach its full potential. The door opened, and Admiral Reed walked in. She looked older than she had 5 weeks ago. "We're out of time," she said without greeting. "The Carvers broke through our outer defenses faster than expected. They'll reach Jupiter in 3 days." James looked at his team, then at the Phantom. "We need another week at least." "You don't have a week," Laura replied. "The military leadership wants to pull your team back to Earth to work on conventional defenses." The room went silent. Everyone looked at the Phantom, their creation still unfinished. "No," James said firmly. "We launch now." Tom stood up. "The AI isn't ready. The weapons aren't properly calibrated," Ellen added. "The power core could explode," Mark warned. James looked at each of them. "I know. But if we don't try now, there won't be anything left to save. I'm taking the Phantom out. Anyone who wants to stay behind can go back to Earth with Admiral Reed." No one moved. Tom actually laughed. "You think we'd missed the chance to see if this crazy ship actually works?" "I'm in." "Me too," Ellen said. "My calculations show we have a 23% chance of success. That's better than Earth's chances without us." Mark shrugged. "The ship wants to fly. I can feel it." Laura looked at all of them, then at James. "You need military authorization to launch." James met her gaze. "Are you going to stop us, Admiral?" She smiled slightly. "No. I'm going to give you a mission." She handed him a tablet. "These are your official orders. Intercept the Carver scout fleet near Saturn. Gather intelligence, and, if possible, delay their advance. Do not, under any circumstances, engage the main Carver force." James took the tablet. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm probably sending you to your deaths," Laura said. She looked at the Phantom one last time. "But if there's even a small chance this works, humanity needs that chance." 24 hours later, the Phantom was loaded onto a military transport ship. It wasn't safe for it to fly on its own yet. Its navigation systems were still being programmed. As they prepared to leave lunar orbit, James stood in what would be the command center of the Phantom. It was cramped, with wires hanging from the ceiling and temporary screens set up wherever there was space. "This is really happening," Tom said, strapping himself into a chair that wasn't properly attached to the floor. Ellen was running last-minute checks on her weapons console. "Either we make history or we become a footnote in humanity's last chapter." Mark was whispering to the ship, his hands on the wall, his eyes closed. James sat in the commander's chair and looked at the view screen showing the stars outside. "We're about to find out if the Phantom is just a myth or if it can become real in combat. Everyone ready?" They all nodded. "Then let's go meet the Carvers." The Phantom floated silently near the rings of Saturn. The transport ship had left them here 6 hours ago, and they had been running systems checks ever since. The ship looked different now. Its hull had smoothed out a bit, adjusting to the coldness of space. "Carver scout ships detected." Ellen called out from her station. 5 vessels, heading our way. They'd spotted us. James felt his heart race. This was it. The first real test. "Tom, is the AI ready?" Tom shook his head. "As ready as it can be without combat data. I've named it Echo, By the way, Echo, James repeated. I like it. Mark, how's the power core? Mark was monitoring his screens closely. Stable for now. But remember, we can't push it too hard on this first run. James nodded and gripped the arms of his chair. All right, everyone. Battle stations. Let's see what the Phantom can do. The Carver ships approached quickly. They were smaller than expected, with strange, spiky shapes that somehow hurt the eyes to look at directly. They're scanning us, Tom reported. Echo is analyzing their scan patterns. Weapons are charged, Ellen said. Targeting systems are locked on the lid ship. James took a deep breath. Fire. The Phantom shuddered as energy beams shot toward the Carver ships. 2 hit their target, but the other 3 missed completely. 70% accuracy, just like I said. Ellen muttered, already adjusting her targeting. The Carvers returned fire immediately. Strange purple beams sliced through space toward them. Brace for impact, James shouted. The first hit rocked the ship violently. Warning lights flashed across all control panels. Hull breach in Section 3. Mark yelled, his fingers flying across his controls. The Nanomachines are responding, sealing the damage. Another hit. And another. The Phantom shook with each impact. We're taking too much damage, Ellen called out. But James was watching something strange happening on his display. The ship's hull, where it had been hit, was changing color and texture. Tom, what's Echo doing? He asked. Tom looked up from his screens, his eyes wide with excitement. It's learning. The Nanomachines are analyzing the Carver weapon energy signature and adapting the hull to resist it. Mark, how's the power core handling it? That's the weird thing, Mark replied, looking confused. It's actually getting stronger with each hit. Power output is up 15% and climbing. James smiled for the first time. It's working. The systems are starting to work together. He tapped his console. Ellen, fire again. Same target. This time, when Ellen fired, 4 of the 5 shots hit the lid Carver ship. Its strange hull cracked open, and it began to spin out of control. We hit it, Ellen shouted. Actually damaged one. The remaining Carver ships changed formation, moving to surround the Phantom. They're adapting their tactics, Tom said. And Echo is watching, learning. The ship rocked again as more purple beams hit them, but James noticed the impacts felt less severe. Hull integrity improving, Mark confirmed. The Nanomachines are rebuilding stronger sections where we've been hit. Fire all weapons, James ordered. Let's show them what we've learned. The Phantom's weapons fired, and this time every shot found its target. 2 more Carver ships exploded in silent bursts of light. The remaining 2 Carver ships suddenly broke off their attack and began to retreat. They're running, Ellen said in disbelief. Let them go, James ordered. They'll report back to their fleet, and next time they'll come with more ships. Tom was staring at his screens in amazement. Echo has evolved more in this one battle than in all our simulations combined. It's already rewriting weapons protocols to better target Carver ships. Mark laughed. The power core is now operating at 130% of our original specifications. It's like the ship enjoyed the fight. James looked around at his team, all of them tired but alive with excitement. This is just the beginning. The Phantom is learning, adapting. Next time, we'll be even stronger. Ellen's console beeped. Message from Admiral Reed. She wants a full report. James smiled. Tell her the myth just became real. And we're ready for more. 2 weeks had passed since their first battle. The Phantom had engaged Carver ships 3 more times, and each fight made the ship stronger. Now they were docked at the Jupiter Defense Station for quick repairs and to receive new orders. The station was crowded with Earth's remaining warships, preparing for what might be humanity's last stand. James walked through the Phantom's corridors, touching the walls gently. The ship felt different now. The hull had taken on a slight bluish tint where it had been hit by Carver weapons. The corridors seemed wider, as if the ship had rearranged its internal structure to be more efficient. "Talking to your ship again?" Ellen asked, coming up behind him. James smiled. "It's changed so much. Sometimes I hardly recognize it as the same vessel we built on the moon." "That's the point, isn't it? It's supposed to evolve." Ellen handed him a tablet. "The repair crews are afraid to touch it. They say the nanomachines pushed away their tools." "The ship is repairing itself now," James said. "It doesn't need their help anymore." They walked to the command center together. Tom was there, deep in conversation with a glowing blue hologram that hovered over his console. The hologram had taken on a human-like shape. "Is that Echo?" James asked, surprised. Tom nodded. "It decided it wanted a form to interact with us better. This happened about an hour ago." The hologram turned to James. Its voice was soft but clear. "Commander Walker, I have analyzed our previous engagements and developed 17 new combat strategies. Would you like to review them?" James stared at the AI in amazement. "Yes, Echo, I would." Mark burst into the room, excitement on his face. "The power core is now operating at 200% of original design capacity. I've never seen anything like it. The more we fight, the stronger it gets." Echo's hologram flickered slightly. "I have detected unusual communication patterns from the main Carver fleet. They appear to be focused on our ship. We have become a primary target." "Why would they care so much about one ship?" Ellen wondered. "Because we've destroyed 12 of their vessels without being destroyed ourselves," James replied. "We're the only human ship that's been able to do that." Admiral Reed entered the command center, looking grim. "The main Carver fleet has changed course. They're bypassing the Jupiter defense line and heading straight for Earth." The room went silent. "When will they arrive?" James asked. 3 days, Laura replied. "Earth is evacuating as many people as possible, but there's not enough time or ships." Echo's hologram grew brighter. "I have analyzed their new course. They must pass through the asteroid belt. That terrain would provide tactical advantages for a smaller, more agile vessel." James looked at the Admiral. "We could ambush them there. Slow them down." Laura shook her head. "That's suicide, James. Their main fleet has over 30 warships. The Phantom is impressive, but it can't fight those odds." "We don't need to fight them all," James insisted. "We just need to slow them down, give Earth more time to evacuate." Tom had been quiet, watching Echo's hologram. "Echo, what are our chances of surviving an engagement with the main Carver fleet?" The hologram pulsed. "Based on our current capabilities, survival probability is 17.3%. However, each engagement improves our combat effectiveness by approximately 32%. With sufficient adaptive cycles, survival becomes possible." Mark laughed. "In human terms, we need to get hit a lot before we can hit back harder." "I won't order you to do this," Laura said quietly. "It's beyond what any commander should ask." James looked at his team. No words were needed. They had come too far to turn back now. "We're going, Admiral," he said simply. "The Phantom was built for this moment. It's no longer a theory or an experiment. It's real, and it's humanity's best hope." Laura nodded slowly. "I'll arrange for you to get whatever supplies you need." As she left, Echo's hologram moved to the center of the room. "I have been analyzing the Carver communication patterns. I believe I now understand their language. They are calling us the ghost that learns. They fear us." James smiled. "Good. They should." The Phantom waited silently among the asteroids. James had ordered all non-essential systems shut down to avoid detection. They had been hiding for 6 hours, watching the path the Carver fleet would take to reach Earth. "They're coming," Ellen whispered, even though the Carvers couldn't possibly hear her. Her screen showed 32 large warships moving in tight formation. Echo's hologram appeared, dimmer than usual to conserve power. The lead ship is their command vessel. It is 3 times larger than the others and contains their fleet coordination systems. James nodded. That's our target. We hit it hard and run. The power core is ready, Mark reported. It's been changing. I don't fully understand what it's doing anymore, but it's stable. The hull has completely rebuilt itself after our last battle, Tom added. The Nanomachines have created new structures I didn't program. They're learning on their own. James took a deep breath. Echo, are you ready? The hologram pulsed. Yes, Commander. I have analyzed all previous engagements and created optimal attack patterns. However, I must share something concerning. Everyone turned to look at the AI. The power core modifications have reached a critical threshold. If we push the ship to its full combat potential in this engagement, the core will become unstable. We will have approximately 20 minutes before catastrophic overload. The command center went silent. You're saying this is a one-way trip, James said finally. For the ship, yes, Echo replied. I have prepared an escape pod with enough capacity for all human crew members. There is an 87% probability that at least some of you would survive. James looked at his team. They had become family over these past weeks. I won't ask any of you to. Save it, Ellen interrupted. We're not having this conversation. We all knew the risks when we started. Mark nodded. The ship always wanted to do something great. I can feel it. Echo's core consciousness can be transferred to the escape pod, Tom said. At least part of the Phantom will survive. James felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Then we do this right. We hit them with everything we've got. And we make it count. The hologram flickered. The Carver fleet is entering optimal intercept range in 30 seconds. Power up all systems, James ordered. Weapons to maximum. Let's show them what this ship can really do. The Phantom hummed to life, energy flowing through systems that had evolved far beyond their original design. The hull began to glow slightly, the bluish tint now bright enough to be seen from a distance. Here they come, Ellen said. Fire all weapons on the command ship, James ordered. Full power. The Phantom erupted with energy, firing weapons that hadn't existed when they first left the moon. The beams cut through space and slammed into the Carver command ship's hull. For the first time, they saw a Carver vessel show real damage. Direct hit, Ellen shouted. Their shields are down. But the Carvers responded quickly. Dozens of energy beams lanced toward the Phantom from all directions. Brace, James called out. The impacts were tremendous, rocking the ship violently. Warning lights flashed across every console. Hull integrity at 80%, but stabilizing, Mark reported. The Nanomachines are working faster than ever. Power core temperature rising, Tom warned. Echo was right. We have maybe 20 minutes. The command ship is changing course, Ellen said. They're trying to run. Not today, James replied. Echo, give us pursuit course. All power to engines. The Phantom shot forward, moving with impossible speed for a ship its size. It caught up to the damaged Carver command ship and unleashed another barrage of weapons. Their main engines are disabled, Ellen reported with excitement. The rest of their fleet is in disarray. They've never seen anything like us before. Echo's hologram suddenly expanded, filling the command center with blue light. Commander, I detect all 31 remaining Carver ships converging on our position. This is your opportunity to reach the escape pod. James looked at the tactical display. The Carvers were surrounding them, preparing to destroy the ship that had dared to damage their command vessel. How much time do we have before core overload? He asked. 16 minutes, Echo replied. James nodded. Then we have time for one last miracle. The Phantom glowed brighter now, its hull pulsing with energy that seemed to bend the space around it. The Carver ships had formed a perfect sphere around them, weapons charged and ready to fire. 12 minutes to core overload, Echo announced, its hologram now spread throughout the entire ship. Commander, you must reach the escape pod now. James looked at his team. They all nodded at him. It was time. Mark, Set the power core to maximum output. Route all energy through the hull systems, James ordered. Mark's eyes widened. That will speed up the overload process, but it might give us enough power to do something extraordinary. That's the idea, James replied. Tom, transfer Echo's core consciousness to the escape pod. Tom hesitated. Echo has grown beyond what I programmed. It might not fit in the limited systems of the pod. Echo's voice came from all around them. I have prepared a compressed version of my consciousness. It contains my essential memories and learning algorithms. Ellen, target every Carver ship. Spread our weapons fire as widely as possible. We don't need to destroy them all, just hurt them enough to matter. The ship shuddered as the power core pushed even more energy through its systems. The hull was now glowing so brightly that it hurt to look at the exterior cameras. 8 minutes, Echo warned. The nanomachines are beginning to break down from the energy overload. James stood up. Let's go, everyone to the escape pod. They ran through corridors that were changing shape as they passed, the ship reconfiguring itself for its final act. The walls pulsed with light and energy. It felt alive. When they reached the escape pod, James paused at the entrance. Get in, all of you. Ellen stopped beside him. You're coming too, right? He shook his head. Someone needs to make sure the targeting systems stay locked on when things start breaking down. James, no, she began. This ship was my life's work, he said quietly. I need to see it through to the end. Tom stepped forward. The targeting can be automated. There's no need for. A violent explosion rocked the ship, throwing them all against the walls. More warning lights flashed. 5 minutes, Echo announced. Carver ships are firing continuously. Hull integrity failing. James made a quick decision and shoved Ellen into the escape pod. Tom and Mark followed. Echo, seal the pod doors, James ordered. The AI obeyed, closing the heavy doors before anyone could get out. Launch on my mark, James said, turning back toward the command center. Ellen's voice came through the ship's communication system. James, don't do this. There's room for you. He smiled but didn't answer. Back in the command center, he took his seat one last time. Echo, are you still with me? Part of me remains with the ship, Commander, Echo replied. Its hologram fainter now. The rest is with the pod. James looked at the tactical display. All 31 Carver ships were still firing, their energy weapons battering the Phantom's hull. But the ship was learning, adapting, even in its final moments. What happens when the core overloads? James asked. Unknown, Echo admitted. Theory suggests a cascade effect that will convert all ship matter to energy. The resulting release could disable or destroy nearby vessels. James nodded. Launch the escape pod, maximum speed away from us. Pod launched, Echo confirmed. 3 minutes to overload. James watched as the small pod shot away from the Phantom, quickly becoming just another dot on the tactical display. Divert all remaining power to the hull, he ordered. Let's make this count. The ship responded immediately. The bluish glow turned white, then began to shift through colors human eyes had never seen before. 1 minute, Echo said, its voice now strangely calm. James closed his eyes. It was a good ship, Echo. The best, Commander. It has been an honor. The Carver ships sensed something was wrong. They began to pull back, but it was too late. 30 seconds. James opened his eyes to see the ship's interior dissolving into pure light. It didn't hurt. It felt like becoming part of something greater. Goodbye, Echo. Goodbye, Commander. The Phantom transformed in its final moment, becoming what James had always dreamed it could be. Not just a warship, but something new, something that had never existed before. The power core collapsed, and the ship became pure energy, expanding outward in a perfect sphere of blinding light. From the escape pod, Ellen, Tom, and Mark watched as the light engulfed the entire Carver fleet. When it faded, the enemy ships floated dead in space. The myth had become reality, and reality had become legend.